What is Florida State getting with the two players from Auburn? We're going to talk about that next with Zach Blackerby of Locked on Auburn.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
This crossover of Locked on Seminoles and Locked on Auburn. This is Brian Smith with Zach Blackerby. Wave, Zach. How you doing? Doing good? Doing good?
Hey, friends. Happy Monday.
There it is. This is a very interesting episode. We do a lot of stuff where I come on your show, but now Auburn is sending two guys to Florida State, essentially, Xavier Chaplin and a certain quarterback that you happen to know very well, Mr. Ashton Daniels. Let's talk about them. This is straightforward. It's about two players. We'll get into Chaplin in a minute and some PFF grades, but I want people to know, because I took heat for this. I said, I want Daniels out of this group they were looking at, because leadership, when he did get a chance to play with real offensive coordinator stuff, he was really good. Explain to people the Vanderbilt and Alabama games based on what Ashton did.
Yeah. So, I mean, it definitely seems like statistically the limiting factor in Auburn's offense last year was their former head coach. It was Hugh Freeze. Ashton took over for the Auburn offense the second half against Arkansas and was fine. They didn't score a touchdown against the worst defense, arguably, in college football. But they won the game, and then he gets to start against Kentucky. Auburn scores 3 points. People are asking questions. Hugh Freeze gets fired. Then the rest of the coaching staff, Derek Nix, takes over the offense, and everything changed. Ashton Daniels was electric against Vanderbilt. He was electric against Alabama. He sat the Mercer game because they wanted to preserve his red shirt. So the reason he sat the Mercer game is now why Ashton Daniels is playing for you guys at Florida State. Ashton's an incredible human being. He's an incredible leader. And we knew he was a solid quarterback from what he did at Stanford in the years prior to him arriving at Auburn. But what we saw in a small sample size when he had a competent offensive game plan around him, he was great. Not good. He was great. Auburn outgained Alabama in the Iron Bowl. He looked like the better quarterback, both against Pavia and against Ty Simpson in those two big games. I think statistically there's enough there to back that up. The right balance of throwing the ball and running the ball. He's a good quarterback, Brian. And so then people ask, okay, well, why did he leave? There were screenshots that he sent to a fan that the fan then screenshotted and put on message boards and on social media, where Ashton is saying, look, I wanted to stay at Auburn, but this staff, like, it doesn't really seem like Golish ever showed any interest in meeting with him. And so, of course, Ashton says, okay, if I'm not wanted here, it's unfortunate. If I'm not wanted here, I am going to hit the portal. So I think Florida State's getting a guy who can start at the P4 level and can excel at the P4 level. It just seems like with this new regime taking over, I don't know how wanted he was in this quarterback room for Alex Golish in his first season here at Auburn.
He's also a pretty good runner. He had over 100 yards, I believe, in both of those games. I don't remember him in high school. For those who don't know, Ashton Daniels played at Buford, just outside of Atlanta, prominent program before heading to Stanford and eventually Auburn. Like, I don't see how he's not a fit in Gus Malzahn's offense. Like, that was the other thing I kind of pitched. I'm like, look, this isn't plug and play. You got to learn some of the terminology, but it's as close as you're going to get. And he's not beat up. He didn't play a ton last year, but he's got a lot of experience. Like, to me, this is a pretty easy fit. For those that wanted DJ Lagway, if you would, give me your opinion. Do you think DJ would fit in Gus's offense? I do not. Your thoughts?
I don't think DJ wants to run the ball as much. At least that's the discussion around DJ Lagway. But as far as Ashton fitting in a Gus system, I think it makes a ton of sense. I think then you have to ask, what is Gus's system? I mean, early on at Auburn, we saw success with him as an offensive coordinator, obviously with that Cam Newton guy. That was pretty good. Obviously, his first year as a head coach, first 2 years as a head coach, Nick Marshall was dynamic. But then after that, he kind of quit recruiting dual threat guys. He recruited more of a pocket passer, athletic quarterbacks, but not, Nick Marshall or Cam Newton's. And then obviously, his last quarterback at Auburn was Bo Nix, who was athletic, and they were able to do some stuff. But we haven't seen them. We at the tail end of Auburn, it seemed like he was trying to go away from the typical, read option style quarterback. At Florida State, that doesn't really seem to be the case. It seems to be like kind of getting back to his roots. And so, assuming that's what he wants to run, yeah, I think Ashton Daniels would make a ton of sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to that end, they could have done a lot worse, especially coming off this season, getting somebody that's a good guy, like and I know, and has some production, who's healthy and all that. I think Florida State is ahead of the curve at the quarterback position compared to what most teams, not saying every, but where most teams are. So
yeah, and you mentioned terminology. You may have to come in and learn the terminology. Like, let's remind people, he has a degree from Stanford. This is a smart guy. He didn't enroll at Auburn before the spring. He wanted to finish his degree at Stanford because he wanted his degree to say Stanford on it and not Auburn. And as much as I love Auburn, it's hard to fault him for that decision.
Yeah, I think that was probably the wiser decision for Mr. Ashton Daniels. That long term, that's the way to go. When we come back, I want to talk about Xavier Chaplin. This is a rather interesting player that went to Auburn with high expectations, mixed results. That is next here on this crossover edition. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. We are down to the college football final, and FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on all the action, even during the final game of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel gets a profit boost right to you, waiting for you inside the FanDuel app. Here's what you're going to love about it. You're going to be able to ride with your favorite team on this, whether that's Indiana or Miami. Play the odds at 7.5 opening line for the Hoosiers over the Canes. But if you want to bet on the Canes, that's fine as well. Whatever you want to do, you can do player props or anything else. And when you use the profit boost, you get even bigger winnings. FanDuel is the best place to get in all the action all playoff long. Visit FanDuel.com to get in on the playoff profit boost every single game day. And we are also brought to you by our friends over at Wayfair. The new year is here. Perfect time to get a reset for your apartment, for your condo, for your house, or whatever you got going on. And if you're going to be spending more time at home during the winter months, you might as well get a good feel for how it's going to be all the way through. That's why you should check out Wayfair. It's a nonstop opportunity for you to get your home back on track or just get a refresh. Bedding, mattresses, storage, solution, anything you want for any room, Wayfair makes it easy for you to do. Wayfair has everything from pillows. They've got the ability to get coasters. You want a table, you want a desk for your computer, anything you can imagine. I personally got a desk off of Wayfair, and to be honest, I'm very happy with it. Got there in 3 days, delivered right to my door. Get organized, refreshed, and back on track every single time you need something from Wayfair.com. All you have to do is go to Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style and every home. All right, Zach Blackerby hanging out with me here. We're doing a crossover. I think this is one of the more difficult players to try and figure out.
Yeah.
And I'm being just totally honest here. Xavier Chaplin, like when you say 6'7", 348 pounds, a lot of experience, a lot of talent, but at the same time, you're talking about a guy that was up and down, I guess. Is that the best way to give terminology on him, Zach? Like, what would you say is the overall theme for like one or like a phrase or one word for Xavier this past season for the Tigers?
Yeah, maybe just like falling short, which is funny because as you see on the screen there, he's 6'7". There's nothing short about this guy. No, I mean the backstory with Chaplin is he was the number one portal offensive tackle this past season when he came out of Virginia Tech. Auburn pushed hard for him. They paid up for him. They got him and Mason Murphy. Murphy from USC was the number 2 tackle. And they wanted to revamp this offensive line. And Chaplin seemed to be one of those guys that was seen as a can't miss going into last season. He was dubbed based off of what he did at Virginia Tech as a first-round draft pick in a lot of mock drafts, Brian. And then for whatever reason, it just didn't pan out. And I want to be I want to be clear here. I wanted Auburn to keep Chaplin. I wanted him to be a part of this rebuild that Alex Golish is trying to do on the offensive line because, as you said, tackle is so interesting in the portal because when you have elite tackles, they do everything they can to keep you. You don't see elite offensive tackles in the portal very often. And Chaplin was dubbed as an elite offensive tackle when he entered the portal from Virginia Tech last year. I think a big part of pretty much every offensive player at Auburn last season, I think they all fell short of what they actually are while Hugh Freeze was there. And then once Hugh Freeze was fired and Derek Nix took over the offense as offensive coordinator, and you started to see some of these games that we were talking about a second ago with Vanderbilt and Alabama, you saw the offense come to life. And you saw some of these guys that we were dubbing superstars in the making all offseason actually play and look like what we thought that they would. Chaplin, I don't know if he really got that bump, but I think the offensive line as a whole did. I don't think Chaplin got worse when he was at Auburn. I don't think you can look at what happened at Virginia Tech and then be like, oh, that's not who he is. And his year at Auburn made him somehow worse. I don't think that's what happened. I think scheme limited off. I got a lot of slack from Auburn fans last year because I kind of championed the O-line. I was like, I don't think the offensive line is as bad as people are making it out to be. I think some of it was Jackson Arnold holding onto the ball too long for the first half of the season. And I think even, when Jackson was benched while Hugh Freeze was still there, I still think the offense was just so predictable that nobody on the offensive line could really consistently succeed. So Chaplin's interesting. And look, I've been told like guesstimate numbers, and I'm sure you have too, but like Florida State paid for this guy. They paid a lot of money for Chaplin to come in. And so there are plenty of programs that still believe in a guy like Chaplin. I think Chaplin could be a solid player for whatever it's worth, though. It didn't work at Auburn.
Well, the last 4 games that he played, this pass blocking grade by PFF, 74.6 against Kentucky. Say what you want about them as an offense, but their defense is legit.
Yeah, their front seven was good. Yeah.
86.6 against Vandy. Clark Lee knows defense. 76.5 against Mercer and 67.7 against Bama. Like, he finished the year on a pretty good note.
Yeah.
If he's healthy and he's motivated, this is a draft year for him. This is it. Like, Florida State should have one of, if not the best left tackle in the ACC, which I know it's not the Southeastern Conference, but like, that's a pretty darn good player. Is there anything that you would have reservation about if you were a Florida State fan, or is this like, this guy's going to start? Like, there's really no reason to think that he's not going to be the guy, right?
Well, I think with what you're probably paying him, that he has to start. No, there was a big talking point that emerged because, Hugh Freeze press conferences were always must-see TV just because you never knew what he was going to say. And at the end of one, I forgot what game it was after, but it was his typical Monday afternoon presser. He ended it with talking about how Chaplin just had a hearing issue. And we're all like, what? And so like you couldn't hear the snap count. And after digging, it was just a miscommunication internally, which is probably the word to use throughout the Hugh Freeze era at Auburn. I don't believe that this is true. Everyone I've talked to within the program is like, yeah, I don't know why that happened. And it sounds like he made it right with Xavier. But I do think, the biggest reservation is, okay, it didn't work in the SEC, but it has worked in the ACC with Virginia Tech. Is that good enough to be a starter at FSU? And the answer to that, I think, is yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way that it's not. So, like, Florida State obviously is not in a position to just go out and dominate next year. Like, they got a lot of things going they got to worry about on defense. But offensively, with like, if you get a left tackle with that much experience, they should be in a pretty good spot. Just out of curiosity, who is Auburn most likely going to play at left tackle for them next year? That's probably going to be a discussion point for your show, I would imagine, all the way through spring ball because it's so vital.
Yeah, they've added 2 offensive tackles with experience in the portal. Joe Simmons, the tackle from JMU, who I think is the better of the 2, and then Stanton Ramil the left tackle from Michigan State. Most of the early depth charts that people are writing are putting Stanton Ramil at left tackle. I think Simmons makes more sense, but we'll see how it plays out. But it'll be one of those guys starting at left and one of those guys starting at right, unless something else interesting happens.
There you go. Zach, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Yes, Locked on Auburn available wherever you get your podcasts, and of course, every day on YouTube.
Absolutely, brother. I am Brian Smith, host of Locked On Seminoles and Locked On the Portal. That is Zach Blackerby. Thank you very much. Everybody have a good one.